Hello, I'm G.V. Anderson. I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer who lives in Dorset. My short fiction has won a World Fantasy Award, a British Fantasy Award, and this year was nominated for a Nebula. You can read my short fiction in Strange Horizons, Lightspeed, fantasy and science fiction, and I've got a new story coming to Tor.com in September of this year. I thought today that I might read the opening of one of my short stories. It was published in 2018. It's called Waterbirds, and it was originally out in Lightspeed magazine. It can be read for free in its entirety on their website, but it's also been reprinted in Best of British Science Fiction 2018 with tons of other fantastic people. And it has also appeared in this gorgeous anthology which collects the Hugo longlist from last year. So lovely, lovely cover. So I'm going to start just with the opening for now. Hope you enjoy. Constable Kershaw has not uttered any overrides, nor issued a warrant to access her memory logs. But Celia understands nonetheless that she is expected to stay, to sit and answer his questions like a suspect. It surprises her, this treatment, like she's human. "Are you chilly, Constable? Shall I light a fire?" "Yeah, all right," he says, removing his hat and settling into the armchair her employer always favoured. Once the logs are crackling and spitting, the dank little sitting room quickly loses its early morning pall. The permeating smells of brine from the beach and the mould lurking behind the bookcase retreat. A teacup from last night still sits on the mantelpiece. The rim is marked by purple lipstick. Irene hasn't been here, has she? Celia's short-term memory drivers are old, her logs slow to recalibrate. She tidies the teacup away, aware of the constable's gaze, and smooths the embroidered antimacassar draped over the back of the second armchair before taking a seat herself. "How should I address you now?" Kershaw says, smoothing his moustache. "Mix?" With her employer, Mrs. Lawson, missing, presumed dead, the contract between them is terminated and Celia is free to revert to her default settings. She may choose any name, any gender. But this employment was her longest, lasting 2 decades. Indeed, without it, she would have been decommissioned long ago. "Mrs. Lawson always called me Celia," she replies, clasping her hands in her lap. He cocks a brow. "You don't owe her anything. She's let you fall apart." She glances down at her hands, the frayed skin around her knuckles, and stays silent. "All right, Celia." He activates his notepad. "Tell me what happened this morning." He already knows. He asked the same question when they stood together and looked out at the garments strewn across the sand. But she recounts it for the sake of the official record. How she booted up at 5:38 a.m. after a full shutdown, just as the sunrise struck the back of the cottage. She started making the usual breakfast only to find Mrs. Lawson's bed untouched. The front gate was open. She'd heard the iron bolt tapping home against its sheath as it swung in the wind. At 6:03 a.m, she grasped the rotting gate, stopping it mid-swing, and looked out at the mudflats that led down to the beach and the wash beyond. Sodden things frilled there like scuds of foam. White down feathers had blown about and got caught in the fleshy stalks of sea blight growing between the fence posts. She plucked one and rubbed it between her fingers as she strode barefoot onto the cold sand. The sodden things were the many layers of Mrs. Lawson's clothes, Her bed socks, her undergarments, her nightgown, her housecoat, shucked off and stepped out of, one by one. Where the sea licked the land, Celia found a messy blast of feathers, like the ones seen on busy roads sometimes, or in coops after a fox has got in. There was no sign of blood. Where were you last night? Celia stares at the carpet. Recovering from a full shutdown has made her groggy. Where were you last night? He repeats louder. Are your ears as knackered as the rest of you? Respond. Not so human, then. I was here with Mrs. Lawson. Can anyone confirm that? She thinks of the teacup marked with purple lipstick, shivers imperceptibly, holds his gaze. No. He sighs. How long have you been coming here with Mrs. Lawson, Celia? He knows this as well, knows she remembers him as a cocksure teenager, who, when he first saw her, said, You're one of those fuckbots, right? When can I have a go, then? But he has to ask, for the official record. 20 years every May. She came alone before that. Was there anything different about her this time? She was ill, tired from the journey. We only arrived yesterday. Why'd she bother then? There's nothing for tourists here. Was she meeting someone? I don't know. The exchange has drawn him in, brought him to the edge of the armchair, but now he reclines with an invasive mixture of frown and smirk on his face. He rubs his temple. I find it hard to believe she didn't share this information with you, her companion of 20 years. What services did you provide Mrs. Lawson, if she didn't trust you with something like that? Was it physical? Celia kinks her neck. A shard of dry silicone snaps off. The question in his mouth feels dirty. Many people withhold personal or sensitive data from their companions in case of a security breach. It's not unusual. And Mrs. Lawson employed me for my social features. The exact duties stipulated in my contract and its amendments do not seem relevant to this investigation. Don't they? As her companion, aren't you responsible for your employer's personal safety? It depends on the contract. Do you have it to hand? No. The master copy is filed with Mrs. Lawson's solicitor, and another copy archived with Mixmill Incorporated. Then I'll need to see one to determine if your actions or inactions were malicious. Mrs. Lawson was a vulnerable woman with no family. If you're found to have somehow broken your own protocols, you'll be decommissioned. Do you understand? Celia nods and rises. I no longer have instant mail functionality, but I can give you the contact ID for the solicitor. Would you like a cup of tea while we wait? He peers up at her suspiciously. All right. I need to phone the sergeant anyway, but stay inside the house. The kitchen is almost bare, a typical holiday home. There's an electric kettle and a packet of tea leaves on the ugly, outdated countertop, and a frying pan left over from breakfast, spotted with grease. Mrs. Lawson was not here to eat the eggs and bacon, and Celia can't digest food like the newer Mixmill models. Perhaps Constable Kershaw would like them with his tea. The thought comes automatically, unwanted, a manifestation of the constant urge to please that underpins her code. She strikes the heel of her palm against the countertop in frustration, the noise buried beneath the rattle of the pipes and the rush of water as she fills the kettle. It's from the cold tap, so it'll take longer to boil. She flicks it on. You're one of those fuckbots, right? She splays her hands on either side of the sink and looks out of the grubby window at the mudflats. Dumpy little plovers wade in the watery crevasses that look like so many stretch marks in the sand. And, bite by bite, she remembers. Irene, the train, what Mrs. Lawson has done. As I said, that was the opening to my 2018 story Waterbirds, which is free to read now at Lightspeed magazine. If you're interested in finding more of my work, there's a list of all my published stories so far on gvanderson.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Luna_Luminarium. Hope to see you all again soon. Take care. Bye.